Take another seat. I'm already comfortable.
No, you're sitting in mine. Ma'am, please don't make this difficult. Shut the flight down.
Mom, I need you to take 6C so we can finish boarding. Renee Carter looked from the flight attendant to the cream leather seat beside the window. Seat 2A, her seat. The boarding pass was still open on her phone, the number bright beneath her name. A white man in a navy cashmere jacket had already settled there with a glass of sparkling water and his laptop spread across the tray. Renee shifted the strap of her brown leather briefcase higher on her shoulder. At 43, she had spent enough years walking into conference rooms where people assumed she was somebody's assistant to recognize the moment when a decision had been made before anyone bothered with the facts. "I'm assigned to 2A, she said. The attendant, Dana, gave the quick professional smile of someone trying to make a problem disappear before the cabin door closed. "We had to make a seating adjustment." "What kind of adjustment?" Behind Renee, passengers were still coming through the forward door of North Star Airways Flight 419, rolling bags bumping across the threshold. A catering cart rattled somewhere behind the galley wall. The cabin smelled faintly of coffee and the citrus cleaner used between flights. Dana lowered her voice. "Mr. Vance is one of our priority guests." The man in 2A glanced up. To be 55, silver at the temples, expensive without needing labels. Renee recognized him now. Grant Vance, chairman of a hotel investment group, whose face appeared often enough in business magazines to make airline employees remember his preferences. Vance looked at Renee, then at Dana. "I was told this seat was available." Renee held up her phone. It wasn't. For the first time, Vance seemed uncomfortable. Then somebody made a mistake. Dana stepped slightly closer to Renee, blocking the aisle as if proximity could turn her request into policy. "I can compensate you with a travel credit." "I don't want a credit. I purchased 2A. A younger flight attendant standing near the galley stopped arranging bottled water. His nameplate read ELI. His eyes moved from Renee's screen to the printed passenger list clipped beside the service cabinet. Dana noticed, "Ellie, please continue setup." He hesitated, then obeyed. That hesitation mattered to Renee. She had built Carter Meridian Partners around details other people dismissed: freight contracts, supplier failures, insurance exclusions, scheduling penalties. Her clients paid her because she noticed when paperwork and reality stopped matching, and something here did not match. Dana had not scanned Renee's boarding pass. She had not checked the manifest. She had not even asked Vance to show his. She had simply decided who looked more likely to belong in 2A. "Who authorized the change?" Renee asked. Dana's smile disappeared. "The gate team." "Name?" "Mom? Boarding is being delayed." "That isn't a name." A businessman waiting behind Renee sighed loudly. Someone farther back asked what the holdup was. Vance closed his laptop. "Look," he said, leaning toward the aisle. "I have a connection in Seattle and a meeting tonight. You moved me here, they moved me here. I didn't choose you." Renee studied him for a second. That was probably true. It also did not give him her seat. She turned back to Dana. "Please check the assignment before you remove me from something I paid for." Dana finally reached for the manifest. Eli spoke before she could open it. "Dana." His voice was low. She looked at him. He pointed toward the paper in her hand. 2 Alpha is still under Carter." Dana's expression changed for half a second, not into surprise, but irritation. Then she folded the manifest closed. "The cabin supervisor approved the accommodation," she said. "If you refuse the alternate seat, we may have to classify this as non-compliance with crew instructions." Renee felt heat rise beneath the collar of her blouse. There it was. The seat dispute had become a behavior problem. She could hear her late father's voice from years ago, after a hotel clerk had once demanded 3 forms of identification from him while waving the couple ahead through with one. "Make them write down what they are doing." Renee placed her briefcase on the floor. "I'm not refusing a safety instruction," she said. "I'm disputing an unauthorized reassignment." Dana reached for the interphone. "Then we'll have the captain decide." Across the galley, Eli quietly pulled the passenger manifest from its clip before anyone could replace it. Renee saw him fold it once and slide it beneath the service binder. She did not know yet whether he was protecting her or protecting himself, but she knew one thing. Somebody on Flight 488 had changed the story without changing the record, and now they were making that story official. The captain did not come out. Instead, A broad-shouldered man in a charcoal vest stepped through the cockpit door and introduced himself as Martin Shaw, the lead cabin supervisor. He listened to Dana for less than 30 seconds, while Renee stood 3 feet away. She was offered an equivalent accommodation, Dana said. She's refusing to cooperate. Renee watched Martin absorb that version before looking at her. Not once did Dana mention that 2A was still assigned to Renee on the manifest. Martin turned. Mrs. Carter, I understand you're preventing boarding over a seat change. No. I'm asking why my confirmed seat was given to another passenger without my consent. We sometimes have to make operational adjustments. For what operational reason? His pause was almost invisible. Passenger accommodation. That's not an operational reason. The line behind Renee had stopped moving entirely now. A child somewhere near the boarding door began asking his mother why they weren't sitting down. The jet bridge hummed through the open doorway, and warm air leaked into the chilled cabin each time someone shifted near the entrance. Martin held out his hand. I see your boarding pass? Renee gave him the phone. He looked at 2A, then at the manifest Dana had reopened. Something tightened in his face. Do you have another version of the seat map? Renee asked. Martin handed the phone back. The gate may have made an adjustment that hasn't synchronized. Then check the gate record. Dana cut in. Martin, we're already 12 minutes behind. Renee noticed Eli glance at the clock above the galley panel. 12 minutes. That number meant something to him. Martin keyed the interphone and asked the gate agent to come aboard. While they waited, Grant Vance rose from 2A. He was tall enough that his shoulder nearly brushed the overhead bins. I can move, he said. Dana turned sharply. Mr. Vance, that isn't necessary. It seems fairly necessary. For the first time, Renee looked at him without irritation. Vance had benefited from the decision, but he no longer looked comfortable being its excuse. Dana's voice became softer with him. You're handling it. Renee caught the difference immediately. So did Eli. Vance noticed it a moment later. He stepped into the aisle. Then handle it by putting the passenger whose name is on the seat in the seat. Martin rubbed the bridge of his nose. Sir, please remain seated while we verify. A woman in a North Star Gate jacket appeared at the door. Her badge identified her as Melissa Crane, departure coordinator. Dana spoke first. Melissa, you reassigned 2A from Mr. Vance, correct? Melissa frowned. No. The answer seemed to reduce every sound in the front cabin to its separate parts. Ventilation, a luggage wheel turning, the muted chime from the boarding scanner outside. Dana's hand stopped on the interphone cord. Melissa continued. I upgraded Mr. Vance from 4D after his original seat had a broken power module. Put him in 2C. Vance looked across the aisle. 2C was empty. Martin opened the manifest again. Then who moved him to 2A? Stepped closer. I didn't. Dana exhaled through her nose. The system must have changed it after boarding began. Eli spoke from the galley. His system didn't. Everyone looked at him. He swallowed. I checked the printed load sheet before first boarding. Carter was 2A. Vance was 2C. Dana's stare sharpened. Ellie, I'm just saying what it showed. Renee could see his fingers pressing into the edge of the service counter. Martin shifted into the tone of a manager trying to regain control. All right, there may have been an internal communication error. Ms. Carter, Mr. Vance is willing to move, so this can be resolved. Renee should have taken the seat. She knew that. Her presentation in Seattle was in 5 hours. Carter Meridian was finalizing a supply chain resilience contract she had worked on for 11 months, and missing the opening session would cost her credibility with a client who already thought boutique firms were risky. But she looked at Dana. Before I sit down, I want the reassignment documented. Martin's expression hardened. That is not necessary for travel. It became necessary when I was threatened with a non-compliance report for asking you to check your own records. The gate agent looked at Martin. Eli looked down. Dana said, You're escalating this now. Renee almost laughed, but stopped herself. Martin handed her phone back. If you continue delaying boarding after the seat has been restored, I will have to note that in the incident report. There it was again, the story changing faster than the facts. Renee felt the old instinct to handle everything herself rise too quickly. She reached into her briefcase, found a business card, then stopped. Calling her attorney would turn a seat dispute into something bigger before she understood what had happened. So she called someone else. One number, North Star's Corporate Travel Integrity Desk. Her firm had used the airline for years under a managed travel contract. and Renee knew the agreement required immediate preservation of passenger service records when a disputed downgrade involved discriminatory treatment allegations. When the representative answered, Renee did not mention lawsuits or threaten anyone. She gave her name, flight number, seat assignment, and 6 precise words. "Please place the record under preservation." Agent asked her to hold. Less than a minute later, the scanner outside the aircraft stopped accepting passengers. A warning tone sounded from the gate computer. Melissa stared at the screen beyond the door. Then she looked back into the cabin. "Martin," she said. "Dispatch just put Flight 418 on operational hold." The operational hold changed the cabin faster than any argument had. A red message flashed across the gate monitor, and the boarding scanner gave a flat refusal tone each time Melissa tried to clear it. 2 passengers still standing in the jet bridge were directed back toward the seating area. Inside the aircraft, Martin stared toward the open door as though the delay itself had become an accusation. "What did you do?" Dana asked. Renee looked at her. "I asked them to preserve the record. That does not shut down a flight." "Ew," Renee said. "It shouldn't." Melissa had already picked up the gate phone. Her side of the conversation came in fragments. "Yes, Flight 4 Wayne. No, we have not pushed." "Understood. I'll hold the door." She covered the receiver and looked at Martin. "Dispatch says we cannot depart until passenger integrity clears the cabin event." Martin lowered his voice. "Why is passenger integrity involved?" Melissa glanced at Renee, then at Dana. "Because someone entered a service recovery note against Ms. Carter at 6:38. Renee checked the time on her phone. 6:44. She had boarded less than 10 minutes earlier. "What does the note say?" she asked. Lisa hesitated. Martin answered for her. "Internal records aren't discussed in front of passengers." Renee felt herself getting angry now, not the controlled heat from before. Something sharper. She had been careful, had asked for records instead of accusations, and apparently someone had been writing about her while she was standing 5 feet away. Grant Vance was still in the aisle. "You wrote her up before she refused anything?" he asked. Dana folded her arms. "Did he said I wrote anything?" Eli turned toward the galley cabinet. Renee noticed. "What is it?" she asked him. He looked first at Dana, then at Martin. Nothing in his face suggested bravery. He looked scared. "There's a cabin tablet," he said. "Service notes sink through it." And his expression hardened. "Ellie, stop." He did, physically. His hands came away from the cabinet, but the sentence was already out. Martin stepped between them. "No one touches the tablet until corporate tells what to do." That, at least, was the correct decision. Renee exhaled and tried to think past her anger. She called her business partner, Naomi Brooks. Naomi answered on the second ring. "You boarding?" "Technically." There was a pause. "What happened?" Renee watched Vance return to 2C without being asked. He took his laptop with him and left 2A empty. "They gave my seat away, threatened to mark me non-compliant, and now corporate has the flight on hold." Naomi was silent for a beat. "Renee." "No. No, you don't. Your client starts at noon. If you miss that session, Langford Logistics can reopen the bid." Renee closed her eyes. That was the part no one in the cabin could see. She was not traveling for a vacation or a victory lap. Carter Meridian had spent almost a year building a contingency model for a regional distribution network. Her firm employed 14 people. Losing this contract would not destroy them, but it would make the next 6 months smaller and harder. "Take the seat if they give it back," Naomi said. "Document everything later." Renee looked at 2A. For the first time that morning, she wondered whether she had chosen the wrong hill. "I was about to. And do it." Melissa ended her call. "Corporate wants the cabin tablet secured and the original printed manifest retained. No edits to the incident report until they finish the preliminary review." Dana's face changed. Not dramatically, just enough. Renee saw it. Martin saw it too. "What incident report?" he asked. Dana looked toward the cockpit. "I started one when Miss Carter refused the reassignment. She hadn't refused when the note was entered," Melissa said. Dana's eyes moved to her. "You weren't in the cabin?" "No, but the timestamps are." Eli stood very still. Renee understood then why he had hidden the printed manifest under the service binder. He had not known exactly what was happening, only that the paper record might disappear into a recycling bin once the digital story became official. Martin retrieved the tablet himself and placed it on the galley counter without opening the service application. "Who logged in last?" Dana did not answer immediately. Vance spoke from 2C. I'd like my name included in whatever review happens. Martin turned toward him. Vance rubbed a thumb across the edge of his laptop. I accepted 2A because Ms. Collins told me the passenger assigned there had agreed to move. Renee looked at Dana. So did everyone else. Dana's shoulders stiffened. I said we were handling an accommodation. No, Vance said. You said she'd already accepted. The lie was small enough to sound ordinary. That made it worse. Martin looked toward Renee. Carter, your seat is restored. You can take 2A. She almost moved. Then Melissa's gate phone rang again. Answered, listened, and her expression tightened, understood. When she hung up, she faced the cabin. Passenger Integrity found a second entry attached to Miss Carter's profile. It says she became verbally aggressive after being offered an equivalent seat. Renee felt Naomi still waiting on the phone against her ear. She had never raised her voice. Not once. Martin looked at Dana. Dana looked toward the closed cockpit door. And Eli, after several seconds of visible hesitation, finally spoke. I heard her make the entries. Eli looked as if he wished the words back the moment they left him. Dana turned toward him. You need to be very careful. His voice shook anyway. Martin stepped between them. Nobody discusses this further until corporate joins the call. They lowered her phone from her ear. Naomi was still there. You heard that? Renee asked. Enough. You may, Miss Seattle. You may. Renee pressed 2 fingers against her temple. Naomi knew her too well to soften the next part. And you're thinking that if you leave now, this becomes easier for everyone except you. Renee looked through the open aircraft door toward the jet bridge. Passengers had been pushed back into the gate area. Melissa was speaking to a station manager near the podium. Beyond the glass, a baggage tug crawled beneath the wing, its diesel engine vibrating faintly through the floor. I'm thinking 14 people depend on me making that meeting. They depend on you making good decisions. That isn't the same thing. No, Naomi said. It usually costs more. Renee ended the call harder than she intended. Immediately, she regretted it. She had spent years insisting that pressure did not excuse poor judgment, and now she had taken her frustration out on the person trying to help her. She slipped the phone into her pocket and stared at 2A. Grant Vance had left it empty. He noticed her looking. Hey, for what it's worth, he said, I'm sorry. You didn't move yourself there. I also didn't ask enough questions. That answer surprised her. He nodded toward Dana. When someone tells you a problem has already been solved, it's easy to accept the version that benefits you. Renee gave him a tired look. Easy for some people. Vance absorbed that without defending himself. Martin's phone rang. Answered, listened, then switched to speaker at the request of the caller. A woman introduced herself as Priya Desai from North Star Passenger Integrity. Her voice came through with the clipped calm of someone reading timestamps while everyone else was dealing with personalities. Flight 418 remains on hold, she said. This is not disciplinary action against any individual. You're preserving a disputed passenger record before departure, Martin said. Understood. Priya continued. The first service note was entered at 6:38:14. It states passenger Carter declined voluntary reassignment and became argumentative. Renee looked at the cabin clock. She remembered exactly where she had been then. Boarding scanner shows Ms. Carter entered the aircraft at 6:39:02, Melissa said from the doorway. Silence held for a moment. Priya answered, correct. Martin turned toward Dana. Dana shook her head. Then the timestamp is wrong. System timestamps are server-generated, Priya said. They are not entered manually. Dana's face tightened. The note had been written before Renee even stepped onto the aircraft. That changed the shape of the whole incident. Renee felt less vindicated than sick. One had not reacted badly to her behavior. Someone had prepared a version of her behavior in advance. Priya asked, Mr. Shaw, who was logged into the cabin's tablet at 6:38? Martin looked at the device on the counter. Yet. We do, Priya said. The credential belongs to Dana Collins. Dana's cheeks colored because I was setting up the cabin. Hey, that doesn't mean I entered it. That is why we are reviewing device activity rather than drawing conclusions. For the first time, Renee appreciated the restraint in Priya's language. No accusation, no instant firing. Just a record that could be tested. Eli raised his hand slightly, almost like a student. There's something else. Martin closed his eyes for half a second. What? When Dana saw Mr. Vance at the door, she asked me whether 2A had boarded yet. Dana snapped, that is normal cabin coordination. Eli nodded. It can be. He looked at Renee. But then she said, "We can fix this before she gets here." Renee felt the words settled differently than an insult would have. There was no slur in them, no explicit statement about race. Just a decision that Renee's reservation was movable before Renee had been treated as a person who might object. Priya asked Eli to repeat the statement and identify where he had been standing. He did. Then she asked the question Renee had been waiting for. "Miss Carter, what outcome are you requesting right now?" Renee glanced again toward the gate. She could demand removal. She could ask for supervisors. She could turn the cabin into the kind of spectacle that would spread online by lunch. Instead, she said, "I want the original seat assignment restored, the false behavioral notes locked from further editing, and a written explanation of who authorized the reassignment." "Anything else?" Renee thought of Seattle. "Yes. I want this aircraft released as soon as the records are secure. The other passengers didn't do this." Aunt Vance looked down. Martin's posture softened by a fraction. Priya said, "That is our goal, too." A minute later, Melissa received another message at the gate podium. She read it twice before returning. "The hold has been narrowed," she said. "Operations can prepare for departure once the device image is captured and the crew status is resolved." Dana looked up sharply. "Crew status." Martin's phone buzzed again. The message, then faced her. "Dana, you're being removed from duty pending review. That is not termination." The distinction seemed to sting more because it was precise. A reserve attendant was being sent from another gate. Dana stared at Renee. "You got what you wanted?" Renee shook her head. "No." She picked up her briefcase and finally moved toward 2A. "I wanted you to check the seat." Dana said nothing. As Renee sat down, her phone lit with a message from Naomi. "Langford moved your presentation to 1. I bought you an hour." Renee looked at it for a long moment. She had not handled everything alone, after all. Outside, the baggage tug moved away from the aircraft. Inside, however, Flight 4 still could not close its door. Corporate had secured the records. Now they had to determine whether the false note had been an impulsive shortcut or part of something larger. The reserve attendant arrived 9 minutes later carrying a Navy roller bag and the expression of someone who had been told only half the story. Her name was Monica Reyes. She greeted Martin, checked the crew roster, then went straight to the forward galley without asking Renee a single question. That helped. Renee sat in 2A with her briefcase between her ankles and watched the departure process rebuild itself around the disruption. Coffee drawers were relocked. Safety equipment was cross-checked. Monica counted first-class passengers against the manifest while Eli restocked the service cart with hands that still moved a little too quickly. Dana had left through the jet bridge with a station manager. Confrontation. No public humiliation. Just a temporary removal from duty while the review continued. Grant Vance leaned across the aisle. "Your meeting still possible?" Renee checked the airline clock on the seatback display. "Barely. You do logistics?" "Risk consulting." He smiled faintly. "So today is professionally annoying." Despite herself, Renee laughed once. It was the first normal sound she had made since boarding. Then Martin appeared beside her seat. "Mrs. her. Passenger integrity needs one more clarification before we close the door." Renee looked at the jet bridge. "Make it quick." He handed her his phone. Priya was still on the line. "We finished the preliminary device capture," Priya said. "The cabin tablet confirms the service note originated under Ms. Collins's credentials." Renee waited. "But that is not the only thing we found." Here it was, the deeper problem. Priya continued. "The entry was created from a template." Renee frowned. "A kind of template? A passenger management shortcut. The wording in your note matches language used in several prior reports from this crew pairing." Martin's head came up. "How many?" "I'm not giving a number until the records are validated." That answer told Renee enough. This was no longer a question of whether Dana had invented a description in a moment of irritation. Someone had developed a repeatable way to turn discretionary seat changes into passenger conduct problems. Priya said, "We're preserving the related reports for review." Renee looked toward Eli. He had gone completely still beside the coffee maker. "Does he know about this?" she asked. Priya did not answer for him. Eli did. "I knew the wording looked familiar." Martin turned. "From where?" He swallowed. 3 weeks ago there was a woman going to Denver. Older black lady. She had 1D and someone moved her during boarding. She kept asking why. Afterward, Dana said the passenger had been disruptive. He felt the muscles in her back tighten. What happened to her? She got off. Removed? No. She left on her own. That mattered. The distinction was the kind Carter Meridian clients paid Renee to find. Systems rarely failed only through dramatic acts. Sometimes the pressure was designed so people surrendered the disputed thing themselves, leaving behind a cleaner record. Megan looked sick. You never reported this? Eli stared at the floor. No. Why? Because I was 6 weeks off probation. The answer had no heroism in it. That made Renee believe him. Eli rubbed his palm against his trouser seam. I told myself it was a seat problem. Then another passenger got moved last week. He was black too, but I didn't hear the whole argument. I thought maybe I was seeing something that wasn't there. And today? Renee asked. Billy. Today she wrote the note before you boarded. His voice cracked slightly. That's when I stopped being able to tell myself that. Renee thought about her father again. Not the hotel desk this time, but the years after, when he had taught her to inspect invoices because people trusted paperwork more than memory. A false record did not only describe the past, it controlled what the next person was allowed to believe. Priya spoke again. Miss Carter, this changes our procedure. We need to expand the review before this crew operates another segment. Martin straightened. Does that affect departure? Not if the replacement staffing is confirmed and the preserved records are secure. But Eli needs to provide a formal witness statement when you reach Seattle. Eli looked terrified. Renee understood why. He had just moved from observer to evidence. Martin asked, Can Flight 418 be released? A keyboard clicked faintly on Priya's end. Stand by. Renee looked out the window. The ground crew had already pulled the final cargo door closed. A Mosture waited near the tug, orange wands resting against one shoulder. 30 seconds passed. Then Martin's phone chimed. He checked the screen. Operational hold cleared. Outside, the jet bridge began retracting. The flight had not been shut down because Renee knew someone powerful. It had been stopped because one phone call had triggered a preservation rule, and the preserved record had exposed something larger than her seat. As the aircraft door finally closed, Eli secured the galley latch. His hands were steady now, but his face was not, because Flight 418 could leave. The review waiting in Seattle had only just become real. At 31,000 feet, the cabin finally settled into the kind of quiet Renee had expected an hour earlier. Monica moved through first class with practiced efficiency, offering drinks without overcompensating or pretending nothing had happened. Grant Vance accepted coffee. Renee took water and opened the presentation on her laptop, though for several minutes she read the same paragraph without absorbing it. Her phone had switched to aircraft Wi-Fi. Naomi had sent 3 messages. Langford confirmed 1. I sent them the muckmit mortal. And yes, I am still mad you hung up on me. Renee stared at the last one, then she typed, You earned that. 3 dots appeared almost immediately. No, you were scared. Different thing. Renee closed her eyes briefly. Naomi was right, which was inconvenient. She wrote back, I'm sorry. The reply came a minute later. And first, apologize with food. Renee smiled and put the phone face down. Across the aisle, Vance had been reading something on his tablet. After a while, he leaned toward her. Well, can I ask you something without making today worse? Cess, that depends on the question. When they moved me, I assumed somebody important had requested it. Renee glanced at him. You are somebody important. It's not what I mean. He lowered his voice. I travel this airline twice a month. They know my assistant, my preferences, connection times. I've benefited from that treatment for years, and now I'm wondering how often the favor came out of somebody else's pocket. Renee did not answer immediately. Aircraft vibrated lightly beneath them as it crossed a patch of rough air. A half-full glass trembled against the indentation in Vance's tray. You probably can't know, she said. That's convenient. Yes. He looked back at his screen. Renee respected him a little more for not asking her to make him feel better. Near the galley, Eli had barely spoken since takeoff. Monica finally touched his elbow and pointed toward the jump seat. Sit for 2 minutes. I'm fine. You've checked that latch 4 times. He looked at the cart beside him as if surprised to find his hand there. Then he sat. Renee watched him rub both palms over his face. At the gate, telling the truth had looked like one decision. In the air, she could see the bill arriving. She waited until Monica moved toward the rear cabin before walking to the galley. Ellie. He straightened. I'm not supposed to discuss the review. I'm not asking you to. He nodded, uncertain. I wanted to say something else. Whatever happens in Seattle, don't change your statement to protect me. His brow furrowed. I wouldn't. Good, also don't improve it. That caught him. Renee leaned one shoulder against the partition. Say what you saw. Say what you heard. If you don't remember something exactly, say that too. Eli looked toward the cabin. They'll ask why I didn't report the others. Yes, and there isn't a good answer. There's an honest one. He let out a humorless breath. You did the job. That's an answer. It sounds bad. It may be bad. He looked at her, startled. Renee softened her voice. But being afraid 3 weeks ago doesn't make your statement today false. For a few seconds he said nothing. Then he nodded. When Renee returned to 2A, a secure message from Passenger Integrity was waiting. Priya had sent a confirmation number for the preserved incident file and a notice that the broader review would compare prior seat change reports against boarding timestamps, assignment histories, and passenger complaints. No conclusion had been reached. Employees named in those reports would be interviewed separately. That restraint mattered to Renee. She forwarded the preservation confirmation to herself, then stopped. A second message had arrived from Langford Logistics. Their procurement director was asking whether Renee wanted to postpone the presentation until the next morning because of the travel disruption. Every sensible part of her wanted to accept. Instead, she opened the model Naomi had updated. One of the assumptions was wrong. Renee had made it herself 2 nights earlier, using an outdated warehouse throughput figure. She stared at the cell. If Naomi had not rebuilt the scenario while Renee was arguing over 2A, they might have walked into a major client meeting with a flawed recommendation. Renee typed a message. Hey, you caught my throughput error, Naomi answered. Renee hesitated. Then move the presentation to tomorrow. The reply took longer this time. Easter. Are you sure? Renee looked toward the window. Far below, cloud tops stretched west like folded fabric. For most of the morning, she had been fighting not to let anyone take something from her. Now she was choosing to give up an hour because pushing forward would serve her pride more than her client. Yes, she typed, we review it tonight together. Naomi sent back one word, good. The seatbelt sign illuminated. A moment later, Martin came through the curtain and stopped beside Renee. Passenger Integrity wants us at a conference room immediately after arrival. Renee closed her laptop. Who is us? You, me, Eli, Miss Collins remotely, and someone from station compliance. Why? Martin looked toward the galley before answering. They validated another report. Renee waited. Same template, he said. Different flight. This time, the passenger had filed a complaint afterward. And unlike the earlier cases, that complaint had never reached Passenger Integrity. Someone inside North Star had closed it first. The conference room in Seattle was too small for the number of people trying not to influence one another. Renee sat at the end of a laminate table with a paper cup of airport coffee cooling beside her. Eli took the chair nearest the door. Martin sat across from him, still in uniform, his tie loosened by half an inch. On a wall monitor, Priya Desai appeared from North Star's operations center with another woman identified as Helen Park, Regional Compliance Manager. Joined by video from a separate room, Helen began with instructions. No one here is being asked to agree on motive. We are establishing sequence, record integrity, and decision authority. Renee appreciated that immediately. Helen turned first to Martin, who had authority to reassign 2A. Gate control could make a documented operational change. Cabin crew could request one, but not finalize it independently. And was one documented? Helen looked at Melissa's departure log on her screen. Correct. Then she turned to Dana. Why was Mr. Vance placed in 2A? Dana's face on the monitor was pale but composed. He was moved forward because his assigned seat had an equipment issue. Helen waited. That explains 2C. Inhaled. I thought 2A would be easier for service. Renee felt Eli shift beside her. Helen asked, easier in what way, Mr. Vance is a high-value passenger. He has tight connections. We try to reduce friction for priority customers. And Ms. Carter? I didn't know her. The answer was so simple that Renee almost missed its weight. Helen did not. So the passenger you knew received the benefit, and the passenger you did not know absorbed the disruption. Dana looked toward another screen, perhaps at her representative. She was trying to solve a boarding problem. Renee spoke before she intended to. There wasn't a boarding problem yet. Everyone turned toward her. She sat back. Sorry. Helen shook her head. No, that matters. She pulled up the timeline. 6:35, Vance had been reassigned to 2C. At 6:36, his profile had been opened on the cabin tablet. At 6:37, Renee's profile had been opened. At 6:38, the conduct note was created. At 6:39, Renee boarded. The order was almost clinical on the screen. Dana leaned forward. I already knew she would object. Helen's expression changed slightly. How? Dana hesitated. The gate display showed she had checked in. That does not answer the question. Dana looked at Renee. For the first time all day, she seemed to realize that there was no version of the sentence ahead that would help her. We've had passengers get territorial about first class. Which passengers? Dana looked away. Helen let the silence remain. Renee felt something in herself pull tight, but she did not interrupt. Finally, Dana said, I made an assumption. Helen nodded once. Yes, no speech followed, no moral summary. Just the fact given its correct name. Priya then introduced the second complaint. 5 weeks earlier, a black software engineer named Terrence Hall had been moved from 1C after boarding so a priority traveler could sit beside a colleague. His complaint later alleged that crew described him as confrontational when he asked to see the reassignment authorization. The complaint had been closed within 24 hours as a service misunderstanding. He'd tapped the screen. It never reached compliance. Martin frowned. Who closed it? We're still establishing that. Dana said, I didn't. No one has said you did. The distinction seemed to make her more nervous. Then Priya displayed something else, a list of template phrases used in cabin incident notes. Most were ordinary. Passenger declined alternate accommodation. Passenger became increasingly argumentative. Crew attempted de-escalation. Renee recognized the language immediately. It was broad enough to fit almost anything. Helen looked at Martin. Are these templates approved? For safety reporting, yes. For seat disputes? No. Eli finally spoke. They saved time. Helen turned to him. Explain. He swallowed. If something happens during boarding, you can click phrases instead of typing everything. It was supposed to be for actual disruption. And what happens when a phrase is selected before the event occurs? Eli looked at the table. It becomes the version people downstream see. Renee thought of the woman who had left the Denver flight voluntarily. Maybe nobody had dragged her off. Maybe nobody needed to. If the record said she was already difficult, every person arriving afterward would treat her resistance as confirmation. Helen asked Eli to recount exactly what he remembered from the earlier flights. And he admitted where his memory was incomplete. He corrected himself twice. Once, he said he had heard Dana use a phrase, then stopped and changed it to, I think I heard it, but I can't swear to the exact wording. Renee watched Priya note the correction without frustration. That was what verification looked like when it was working. Easier than certainty, more useful than performance. Near the end of the meeting, Helen folded her hands. Here is what happens next. Dana remains off duty pending formal investigation. Martin's supervisory decisions will also be reviewed because the inaccurate characterization was repeated after contradictory information was available. Eli is protected under the witness retaliation policy while the review is active. Martin nodded slowly. He did not look pleased, but he did not argue. Helen continued. We are also placing a temporary restriction on pre-boarding seat reassigns involving confirmed premium passengers unless gate control records the reason and passenger consent where consent is required. Renee looked up. That can be done today. As an interim control, yes. Permanent policy takes longer. That answer mattered more to her than an apology. Priya then turned to Renee. Your individual complaint will remain separate from the pattern review. You will receive the written seat assignment history and correction of the conduct notes after legal preservation requirements are satisfied. Renee nodded. Good. Helen asked, is there anything you believe we have missed? Renee looked at Eli, then Martin, then Dana's image on the wall. Yes. She chose her words more carefully this time. Don't build the whole review around whether Dana is biased. Review what made it easy for one person's assumption to become everyone else's record. Helen wrote something down. Renee stood. She had a hotel room, a client model to rebuild, and an apology dinner to owe Naomi when she got home. At the door, Eli caught up with her. Miss Carter? She turned. Hey. What if they decide I should have reported this earlier? They might. He looked stricken. Renee adjusted her briefcase on her shoulder. Telling the truth now doesn't erase what you didn't do then. Hey. He nodded slowly. But it gives them something accurate to work with. Behind them, Helen called Martin back to the table. The investigation was no longer about one seat. Now North Star had to test whether its own reporting system had learned to protect the wrong story. Martin stayed behind in the conference room while Renee and Eli stepped into the terminal. Seattle had moved on without them. Departure boards flickered over the concourse. Espresso machines hissed behind a cafe counter. Travelers hurried past with coats over their arms and phones held near their faces. None of them aware that Flight 418 had spent nearly an hour at the gate because a first-class seat assignment had turned into a record integrity review. Renee checked the time. 11:21. Her rescheduled client presentation was tomorrow now. For the first time since boarding, nothing required her immediate response. It felt almost worse. Eli stopped beside a row of windows overlooking the ramp. "I have another flight in 3 hours. Are they keeping you on duty?" He shook his head. "Helen said I'm being removed from today's remaining segments while they interview me. Paid status." Renee nodded. "That sounds appropriate. It feels like punishment. It may feel that way for a while." He looked toward the aircraft they had just left. Ground workers were already servicing it for the next segment under a replacement crew. "I should said something after Denver." Renee did not tell him otherwise. "I keep thinking about that woman," he said. "I don't even know her name." "Then don't turn her into a way to punish yourself." He looked at Renee. "Use what you remember accurately. Let them find her if the records support it." Eli rubbed the edge of his employee badge with his thumb. "That's very consultant of you." Renee smiled faintly. "I'm off the clock." "Naomi," Renee answered. "Before you say anything, I'm sorry." Naomi was quiet for a second. "Start. I should not have hung up. No, I also moved tomorrow's presentation because you caught my mistake. That part I enjoyed." Renee laughed. "It came easier this time." Naomi asked, "How bad is the airline situation?" "Bigger than my seat, smaller than the internet would make it if somebody posted a 30-second clip." Meaning, they found another complaint with similar language. "Compliance is reviewing the process." "And the woman?" "Off-duty pending investigation." "No." Naomi sounded almost relieved. "Good." Renee knew what she meant. Instant punishment would have been emotionally cleaner and operationally weaker. Her phone buzzed with another incoming call. "Priya." "I need to take this," Renee said. "Call me tonight. We're rebuilding the model together." "Bossy, you employ me badly." The line disconnected before Renee could answer. She picked up Priya's call. "We've completed the first operational decision," Priya said. "I wanted you to hear it directly." Renee moved toward a quieter section of the concourse. "Go ahead." Dana Collins remains suspended from passenger-facing duty pending investigation. Martin Shaw has been reassigned temporarily to ground operations while supervisory review is completed. Neither action is a final disciplinary finding. Renee appreciated the precision. "What about Eli?" "Protected witness status is active." "His schedule and evaluations cannot be modified by anyone in the reporting chain connected to the review without compliance approval." Renee glanced back toward him. He was standing near the window, reading something on his phone. "And the seat policy? The interim control is live for this region. Premium seat changes made after check-in now require a reason code tied to the gate record. If consent is required, the record must show it before the seat is reassigned. That fast, temporary controls can move quickly. Permanent changes need testing, labor review, and system work. Again, no miracle, just a first repair." Priya paused. "There's also an individual remedy for you. Your behavioral annotations have been frozen and marked disputed. It will not be used for future service decisions while the review is open. Your fare difference is being refunded, although you ultimately traveled in the purchased seat." Renee frowned. "Why refund it?" "Service failure compensation." "I don't want special treatment because this became embarrassing." "It isn't special treatment. It's the published remedy available for an improper premium cabin reassignment attempt." That answer satisfied her. "Then fine," it continued. "There's one more development." We located Terrence Hall's complaint. "The software engineer?" "Yes." The original submission was intact in the customer relations archive." Who closed it?" "We know which account did. We do not yet know whether the person using that account followed an instruction, misunderstood the classification, or intentionally kept it away from compliance." Renee looked through the terminal glass. The baggage tractor crossed the wet concrete below, towing 3 empty carts in a straight line. "So you're not calling it a cover-up?" "Not yet." "Good." Priya hesitated. He's Carter. Most complainants ask us to identify who should be punished. Renee watched Eli sit down by the window. I'd rather know what failed. That may take longer. You know. When the call ended, Renee found a message waiting from Langford Logistics. Their procurement director had accepted the delay and asked for the revised model tomorrow morning. No penalty, no reopened bid. The cost she had feared had not vanished, but it had changed shape. She walked over to Eli. They've activated your witness protection status. He looked up sharply. You already knew? The phone just told me. He read the message again, then let out a breath. Renee picked up her briefcase. For the first time that day, Flight 48 was behind her. The consequences were not. 3 weeks later, Renee returned to the airport without wanting to. Northstar had asked whether she would participate in a corrective review session at its Seattle Operations Center. She had almost declined. Carter Meridian was finally through the Langford presentation, the revised model had been accepted, and her team had spent enough billable hours absorbing the disruption from Flight 418. Naomi had been the one to change her mind. If they're fixing the system, she had said, you should see whether they're fixing the part that failed you or the part that embarrassed them. So Renee came. The review room was larger this time, with windows overlooking a maintenance apron, and enough space between chairs to make the meeting feel less like an interrogation. Helen Park was there. Priya joined in person. Eli sat near the center of the table wearing civilian clothes, his employee badge clipped to a canvas messenger bag instead of his uniform. Martin arrived last. He had not returned to cabin supervisor duty. Helen began with the findings. The review had examined 27 premium seat changes involving Dana Collins over the previous 18 months. Most had been routine and properly documented. 6, however, shared the same pattern. A passenger with a valid premium assignment had been displaced for a higher-value traveler without a recorded operational necessity. 4 of those displaced passengers were black. 2 were not. Renee noticed that Priya did not allow the statistic to do more work than it could support. The pattern does not prove that every reassignment was racially motivated, Priya said. It does show that discretionary favors were being granted without proper authorization, and that behavioral language was used disproportionately when certain passengers objected. Helen slid a summary across the table. Dana had admitted using passenger management templates to create anticipatory notes before confrontations occurred. She said she believed doing so helped cabin crews manage boarding efficiently and protected the airline when customers became difficult. She believed, Helen said, does not make the records accurate. Dana had been terminated after the investigation substantiated falsification of service records and repeated unauthorized seat reassignments. Renee read the sentence twice. There was no triumph in it, only consequence. Martin's review had reached a different result. He had not created the false entries or authorized the original seat change, but he had repeated Dana's description after seeing contradictory information and had threatened to document Renee for delaying boarding without first resolving the manifest conflict. He would return to supervisory work only after completing remedial training and a 90-day monitored assignment. Martin looked directly at Renee. I owe you an apology. She waited. I treated the crew's version as more credible because it came to me in operational language. Once I heard non-compliance, I started managing you instead of checking what happened. Renee nodded. It's closer. Martin gave a small, embarrassed smile. I rewrote that apology 4 times, I can tell. For a moment, even Helen smiled. Then Eli spoke. I have one too. Renee turned. He looked uncomfortable. I kept telling myself I didn't know enough on those earlier flights. It was partly true. He paused. The other part is I didn't want trouble. Nobody rushed to rescue him from the sentence. I saw things that bothered me, he continued. Until there was something so obvious I couldn't ignore it anymore. Renee leaned back in her chair. Are you still flying? Yes. Different crew rotation for now. Good. He seemed surprised. I thought you might say I shouldn't be. That isn't my decision. No, I know. I just meant, I know what you meant. She looked at him. You were afraid. You were also silent. Both can be true. Eli nodded. The airline's corrective plan was less dramatic than the investigation. That made Renee trust it more. The seat change shortcut on cabin tablets had been disabled. Post-check-in premium reassignments now required a gate-linked reason code. Behavioral incident templates could no longer be saved before the passenger interaction being described. Any conduct note entered during an active seat dispute generated a review flag if the passenger later submitted a complaint. Terrence Hall's closed complaint had been reopened and corrected. The older woman from Denver had been located as well. North Star had restored the miles she lost after changing her itinerary and offered reimbursement under the same published service failure policy used for Renee. No press release called the changes transformative. No executive stood in front of cameras. Helen simply showed Renee the audit dashboard that would track exceptions for the next 6 months. That was the part Renee photographed for herself. When the meeting ended, Priya walked her toward the elevator. "You asked us to review what made the bad decision easy," she said. "Did you? We found 3 things." Priya counted them on her fingers. Too much cabin discretion. Language templates that sounded factual even when they weren't. Supervisors who trusted the record because it looked official. The elevator doors opened. Renee stepped inside, then turned. "That last one is the dangerous part." Priya nodded. "I know." As the doors closed, Renee saw Eli and Martin still in the room, not celebrating, not forgiven into some clean ending, but doing the less satisfying work of staying inside the system they had helped fail. For once, the record they were building matched the truth closely enough to be useful. 4 months after Flight 418, Renee saw 2A again. Not the same aircraft, not even the same route. She was flying from Chicago to Seattle for the final implementation review with Langford Logistics, and when the North Star app refreshed at the gate, her boarding pass showed the familiar seat number beneath her name. 2A. She stood near the windows for a moment longer than necessary. Naomi, traveling with her this time, noticed. "You want me to trade?" Renee slipped the phone into her coat pocket. "Why would I?" "Because you've been staring at that boarding pass like it insulted your mother." Renee gave her a look. Naomi lifted both hands. Consultant observation. Agent called first class. Renee joined the line. Nothing happened. That was the strange part. Her boarding pass scanned. Agent thanked her by name. Inside the aircraft, a flight attendant glanced at the seat assignment and pointed left. 2 Alpha is by the window. No hesitation. No special warmth either. She preferred that. She placed her briefcase beneath the seat ahead and sat down. Naomi took 2C across the aisle. "You okay?" Naomi asked. "I'm sitting in a chair." That wasn't the question. Renee looked through the window at a baggage loader raising containers into the aircraft belly. "I'm fine enough." Naomi accepted the answer. A few minutes later, an older Mardid carrying a garment bag and stopped beside 2C. He checked his pass twice. "I think that's mine." Naomi looked at her phone. "Mine says 2C. A flight attendant approached. Renee felt her shoulders tighten before she could stop them. The attendant asked to see both boarding passes. Then she stepped aside and opened the gate-linked seat record on her handheld device. "Okay," she said. "Mr. Delaney, you were moved to 3A during an aircraft change. It looks like the text notification didn't send." The man frowned. "I booked 2C. "You did. The replacement aircraft has a different premium layout. I can show you the change history." She turned the screen so he could see it. There was a reason code, an equipment substitution, a timestamp, a record of when the assignment changed. Mr. Delaney sighed. "So, yes, sir. If you'd like, I can also ask the gate whether any equivalent aisle seat remains open." He considered it, then shook his head. 3A is fine. Exchange lasted less than a minute. No one was threatened. No one was labeled difficult. No one had to prove that they deserved to ask why. Renee realized she had been holding the edge of her armrest. Naomi watched the whole thing. "That your policy?" "Partly." "How does that feel?" Renee thought about it. "Boring." Naomi smiled. "Sounds successful." After takeoff, Renee opened Langford's implementation report. Carter Meridian had won the contract. Not because of what happened on Flight 418. The client had never asked for the story, and Renee had never offered it as evidence of character or resilience. They had won because the revised model was better, because Naomi caught the warehouse assumption, and because their 14-person firm had spent months doing the unglamorous work of stress testing routes, vendor dependencies, and contingency inventory. That mattered to Renee more than she expected. The worst morning of her year had not become the explanation for everything good that followed. Halfway through the flight, Priya sent her the 6-month audit summary North Star had promised. Unauthorized premium seat changes in the region had fallen sharply. Conduct notes attached to active seat disputes were being reviewed automatically. Two supervisors had been retrained after audits found they had accepted crew summaries without checking underlying records. There had also been false positives, cases where passengers had genuinely behaved abusively, and the new review process had slowed legitimate safety reporting. North Star was adjusting for that too. Repair had created new work. Renee liked that better than perfection. The final line of Priya's message caught her attention. Eli had completed witness interviews and remained with the airline. He had recently volunteered for a working group testing the revised cabin reporting interface. Naomi leaned over. Good news? Complicated news. Those usually last longer. Renee closed the message. When the aircraft began its descent into Seattle, she looked down at the city, appearing through breaks in the cloud. Months earlier, she had arrived here carrying a false behavioral note attached to her name. Now that note was gone. The system that created it had been changed. The people involved had faced consequences proportionate to what investigators could actually prove. None of it returned the morning she lost. It simply made the next passenger less likely to inherit it. As the wheels touched down, Renee's phone connected to the network and a new message appeared from Priya. Not an emergency, not another complaint, a request. North Star's national policy team wanted an outside consultant to review how discretionary customer service decisions became formal passenger records across the rest of the airline. Renee read it twice. Naomi noticed. What now? Renee looked at the message, then at the briefcase holding the Langford files. For once, she did not answer immediately. She saved Priya's number under a new contact. Then she picked up her bag and followed the other passengers toward the open cabin door. 2 weeks later, Renee sat at the end of Carter Meridian's conference table while Naomi passed around takeout containers from the Thai place downstairs. The Langford implementation review had closed that afternoon. No emergency meeting, no dramatic announcement. Just a signed extension confirming another year of work, 2 additional distribution sites, and enough predictable revenue for Renee to approve the analyst position her team had postponed twice. Naomi slid a container toward her. Chicken basil. You remembered. I remember everything when I'm owed an apology dinner. Renee looked around the room. 3 of her analysts were arguing about forecast assumptions near the whiteboard. Someone had left a charger stretched dangerously across the floor. The office printer had jammed again. It was ordinary. She had missed ordinary more than she realized. North Star's final investigation arrived the same week. The findings confirmed 6 unauthorized premium seat reassignments tied to discretionary VIP accommodations. Dana Collins's termination stood after internal review. Martin Shaw completed his monitored assignment and returned to supervisory duty, with quarterly record integrity audits attached to his team for the next year. Terrence Hall received a formal correction removing the disputed conduct description from his passenger history. The Denver passenger accepted reimbursement but declined further involvement. Eli stayed. His witness statement had helped investigators reconstruct the earlier cases, but the final report did not turn him into a hero. It noted his delayed reporting alongside the information he eventually preserved. He had completed additional reporting training and joined the cabin interface working group. That balance felt right to Renee. North Star also made the temporary controls permanent after labor and safety review. Premium seat changes after check-in now required a documented reason tied to the passenger record. Conduct templates could not be entered before the event they described. Supervisors reviewing a dispute had to open the underlying seat history before relying on a behavioral label. The airline measured compliance monthly. That mattered more than the language of the apology letter sitting unopened in Renee's desk. The flight itself had been delayed 58 minutes. No nationwide shutdown. No hundreds of aircraft grounded. One airplane had stopped because a preservation request triggered an operational hold, and it stayed stopped until the airline knew its passenger record and crew status were safe enough to proceed. Renee preferred the truth at that scale. It was large enough. After dinner, the team drifted out until only Naomi remained, stacking empty containers beside the sink. You going to answer North Star? She asked. Renee knew which message she meant. The national policy team wanted Carter Meridian to review discretionary customer service decisions across multiple airport regions. It would be a legitimate consulting engagement, independently scoped and paid at market rate. It would also put Renee close to the system that had nearly labeled her disruptive before she reached her seat. I haven't decided. Naomi dried her hands. That sounds suspiciously healthy. She smiled. She walked back to her office and opened the bottom drawer. Inside was the original boarding pass she had printed after Flight 41, mostly because her father had taught her never to throw away the first version of anything people later claimed had changed. 2A. The paper was already curling at one corner. Beside it sat the final North Star correction notice confirming that the behavioral annotations had been permanently removed from her profile. 2 records. One described where she was supposed to sit. The other described what the airline had finally admitted happened when someone decided that assignment was easier to take from her than from the man they already knew. Renee placed the correction notice on top of the boarding pass and closed the drawer. Her father would have kept both forever. She suspected she would too. Her laptop chimed. A new message had arrived from North Star's policy office, not the consulting contract. A short note from Priya. Before Renee decided whether to accept the national review, Priya wanted her to examine one anonymized case from another region. No seat dispute this time. No VIP passenger. A traveler had been marked as a security concern after asking for disability assistance that the station record claimed had never been requested. The attached summary was 4 pages. Renee did not open it. Not yet. She forwarded the message to Naomi with one line. Monday morning? Naomi replied almost immediately. Bring coffee. Renee shut down her laptop, turned off the office lights, and carried the empty takeout containers toward the hall. The boarding pass stayed in the drawer behind her. The next record would have to stand on its own.